without streams and touched country.
Now that you've said that, he's going to be tempted.
When I see someone come up with this girl, yeah, welcome to the comments.
All right. Shall we start? So just before I start, I'm going to ask for forgiveness for a couple of things. The first thing is I may not make a lot of sense because Verena did not sleep until last night and woke up about 10 times. So as you can probably tell if you look at my eyes, they're very red. So I apologize for that. The second thing I apologize for is if you feel that some of this you've heard already. So I think with this topic particularly, you might find that a lot of what we say overlaps. But I'm just praying that God gives each person the message they need, even if it's something you heard before. And the third thing is, I'm probably not going to say anything that's like groundbreaking that you've never heard before. Hopefully, so the talk today is about the cross. Hopefully you've all heard a bit about the cross before and know why the cross is important. So it might not be anything like groundbreakingly different, but I pray that God opens our eyes more and more to understand like the mystery of the cross. So just my few caveats to start with. So, as you know, we're in the Lent retreat. This year the theme is about victory. And we've already had our first two talks, lovely talks today about in the wilderness and in the garden. And today's talk, or tonight's talk is in the 11th hour. So it's not actually the literal 11th hour of Good Friday, just in case you get confused, because the cross actually happened at the 6th hour. So it happened a lot earlier in the day. But I think the point of the 11th hour is when we feel like we're in that point of our life where we feel like it's the 11th hour, where like things go on, and we've been having some kind of pain and some kind of problems in our life, and kind of we're reaching this point of the day where like this day is never ending and this problem is never ending, and like what is going on? And we feel like it's our 11th hour, but it's actually focusing on the cross, which happened in the 6th hour. Anyway, so far already. In our retreat this weekend, hopefully we've been on a journey with Jesus. And all of our life, really, like as I said, a lot of this is repeated to what you heard earlier, but our life is a journey with Jesus. And as Claire was saying earlier, like everything in the wilderness, and Christ himself went to the wilderness and was tempted for us. And we said that Christ was in the garden earlier today, and we also have our times where we need to be in the garden. And where did Christ's journey go to? So his journey on the earth, like his whole journey on earth led to the cross. Like that's where he was going. Like when you hear him talking to the disciples, he was like, we're going to the cross. And like whenever you read the Gospels, you can't except understand that the culmination of his journey was the cross. So if we're going on a journey with Christ, that means our journey is also going to the cross. And like sometimes that's not really what we want to hear, but that's the truth of the matter. If we're on a journey with Christ, and everybody is on a journey with Christ, then our journey is going to the cross. So what is the cross? Like, it's very easy for us to say the cross and not really understand what the cross means. Like, to us, like the cross could just be like a symbol that we wear, like it's something we celebrate every year on Good Friday. But like, what is the cross? So I picked a few verses. There's so many verses in the Bible that talk about like what happened with Christ on the cross. But I think like when it comes down to it, like the cross was a place of suffering. Like you can't get around that. Like the cross was a really way to die. It was supposed to be a most humiliating way to die. Like it wasn't reserved for any person who was going to be put to death. It was supposed to be for like the worst criminals. It was supposed to be in the most humiliating way, like on top of a hill so everybody can see your suffering. Like it wasn't hidden away so people couldn't see what happened to you. It was like the worst torture. And he didn't have just the cross. Like I'm not going to go into all the trials and like the pains that he had before. Sorry. Him was dying. Okay, sorry. I think I need to be plugged in. The cross was a horrible, horrible thing. I actually was going to get you a clip of the Passion of Christ to show like the crucifixion. And I sat at home when I was like, oh, this would be a good idea. Like, why don't we get something visual? Because I was telling him I like wanted to put something like not interactive, but like something different. So it's not just me talking. Just like when you put a clear pit will like really make it visual. I sat at home and I YouTube like Passion of Christ and I tried to pick a clip. I couldn't even watch them. I think I watched one for about 10 seconds. But the cross wasn't like something easy. Like we talk about it all the time. But the cross was very painful. And it wasn't just the physical pain that he had. Like he had incredible physical pain on the cross and before the cross with the whipping and all the other things. But it wasn't just the physical pain, like it was the emotional pain that he also felt. Like he is being crucified by people he loves so much, like people he created, people he gave everything for, and they're shouting, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him, and they're like mocking him on the cross, like, oh, if you're God, why didn't you come down? Like they're like going beyond like what you imagine could be done. And like these are people he loves. Like he's like earlier we heard about Jesus. He was betrayed by like his friend. Even when he comes to betray him, he says, friend. Like that's how Jesus saw him. So it's like the worst pain we can imagine. Like one of the verses that I found really striking it from the second one down. It says, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any human being, and his form marred beyond human likeness. When I used to read this verse, I didn't really understand what it meant. And then actually when I watched this like 10-second clip of the Passion, like I understood, like they actually his face was so disfigured because of what he went through. Like he's so covered in like blood and cuts, and imagine like this crown of thorns in his head. Like you can't even, like you almost can't recognize him anymore. Like that's the pain that he went through. Anyway, I won't go into any more gore because it's really tough to take. But this is like real pain. Now most of us maybe don't go to this level, don't have this level of pain in our lives. But I think I don't know what's happening. But I think often, at some point in our lives, we do get to a point where we feel like we're in a lot of pain. Like maybe not at that level, as I said. Like maybe not the physical pain, but it could be physical pain for some of us. It could be emotional pain. It could be mental pain. It could be spiritual pain. Like we often reach a place where we're in some kind of pain or some kind of suffering. It could be even just like our spiritual struggle against sin, which we just feel so defeated at. And usually we reach this point where we feel like, God, where are you? Like, what is going on? Like, I thought I was on a journey with you, and like suddenly, like, I'm in the middle of this suffering. How did I get here, and what is happening? Like, this doesn't make sense to be part of it. But as I said before, like, for Jesus, the cross was always his aim. There's a verse in Isaiah that says, his face is like set like an arrow on its target. Like his target was to go to the cross. And in the Gospels it talks about how he set his face towards Jerusalem. Like he was always looking towards Jerusalem, like not to Jerusalem, like not for Palm Sunday, like the nice bit. But his face was towards Jerusalem because he knew he had to go and be crucified. That was what his aim was for. And he kind of gave his disciples a bit of an idea about this earlier. He was like telling them, I need to go and suffer. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, why would you go and suffer? It doesn't make any sense. And even after his crucifixion, when the gospel is preached, many people say, what are you talking about the cross? Like the Jews say, this is scandalous. Like, how can a Messiah be crucified? And the Gentiles who are supposed to be the wise ones who really like philosophy and wisdom, they're like, this is foolish. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Why would a powerful God be crucified? Like, the cross doesn't make sense a lot of the time when you look at it logically, or when you look at it, I don't know, emotionally. Like, a lot of these things, it doesn't make sense to us. But these are not the things that we look at to get our advice. Like, we don't look at worldly wisdom. We don't look at these things to tell us what's right. What do we look at? We look at Jesus. And it says in this verse that he endured the cross. Like, the cross was painful. It was something to be endured. It wasn't something that was, like, easy. Like, it was painful. But for him, there was a joy that was set before him that made the cross worth it. That made the cross something that he wanted to enjoy. That made it something that he set his mind, like, and set all of his life to go towards. So what's this joy? So I think it was a joy of victory. I think Claire mentioned earlier, like, he did this for us. But it's not just like for us, like he did everything for us, like all of his life was for us. but it was for us, for our victory, because he knew what would be achieved for the cross, in the cross for us. And we're going to look at what the victory is. So I think a lot of the time, we think of the victory of the cross only in relation to the resurrection. So we think, yes, the cross was necessary because the cross meant that he died so then he could rise. And then we get our victory because he rose from the dead. But today, I want us to have a kind of think about it in a different way. That actually the cross in itself, Good Friday, or actually usually in the Orthodox Church they call it Great Friday, like in Arabic, my Arabic's very good. But like in most Orthodox churches, they call it Great Friday. Like we don't call it Black Friday or Sad Friday, like even though it is sad all of the time. But actually it's Great Friday because of what happened on the cross. Not the sadness and the pain, but what was achieved through the cross. So we're going to have a look through a few things, and then we're going to come afterwards to how this all relates to us. So please bear with me, I'm not the quickest speaker in the world. Anyway, so I'm going to go through this really quickly, because you kind of touched on this stuff in the garden earlier. But the first thing I just wanted to mention is this verse here. So from Philippians, he says, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. So who was he obedient to? Like, what was he obedient to?
His father.
His father, yes, exactly. So he was obedient to the will of the Father. He knew that the Father willed that he would die on the cross for the sake of everyone, for the sake of humanity. And even though in all his humanity it was so painful, as we just discussed, and he is the King of glory, it doesn't make sense that he should suffer. He humbled himself and became obedient to the death of the cross. And in this, he showed us and kind of opened the way for us to be able to not be ruled by our old man, our ego, our self-will that kind of always wants to do what it wants, but made it so that we would be able to give up our will to follow the will of the Father, or kind of put our will in the hands of the Father and follow his way. And as Claire mentioned earlier, this was needed because this is the whole problem of humanity that happened right at the beginning of Adam and Eve. So St. Gregory, the Gregorian liturgy, which I love, in it says, I ate of my own free will. I laid aside your law by my own opinion. I neglected your commandments. I brought upon myself the sentence of death. It all started by man choosing just by his own free will, which God gave us our free will to use. He chose to use his free will to kind of ignore exactly what God said and say, I'm just going to do whatever I want. I'm going to make up my own way of living. And by doing that, by ignoring God's word, he brought upon himself, we brought upon ourselves the sentence of death. So Christ's death on the cross gave us a victory over this. It reversed what would happen. It changed what would happen. It gave us a different way. So it's in the Epistle to the Romans, it says, as by one man's disobedience, many were made sinners, so also by one man's obedience, many will be made righteous. So as by Adam, his disobedience, we all became sinners. By Christ's obedience, we become righteous. So that's the first one. The first thing that he did for us on the cross. The second reason that the cross is a victory is a victory of love.
And not quench love. The cross shows us a love that is as strong as death, a love that is even stronger.
So I think the biggest thing we find in the cross is it shows us the victory of love. I think sometimes when you think of victory, or you think of power, you think of mighty people in battles, and I guess that's what the Jews thought of when they thought of the Messiah. They thought, we're going to have a king coming on a horse, he's going to be really powerful, he's going to kill all the Romans. But Jesus showed a different kind of power. He showed us what the power of love was. He showed us that love will go even beyond death, even stronger than death, love will be. And I just have a few things about what his love is like. So these are from Metropolitan Callista's words, his book, The Orthodox Way. He says, Jesus Christ, our companion, shares not only in the fullness of human life, but in the fullness of human death. However far I have to travel through the valley of the shadow of death, I'm never alone. I have a companion. And this companion is not just a man, but is God. Everything he did in our life, in his life, was to show us the way, but also to live everything that we're living. So as we have sorrow, as we have grief, and as we even have death, he went through everything. So we have a companion in everything that we are living. Like, he didn't say, I'm just going to live the good parts of human life. Like, I'm going to live the nice parts of human life. But he said, every part of human life that you experience, I'm going to experience too. I'm going to sanctify it, and I'm going to be able to be there to be your companion in it. I think even like maybe that's one of the reasons why on the cross he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? To show us he understands when we feel that we're abandoned. Of course the Father didn't abandon him. Not like his words, that he knows the Father didn't abandon him. Like he says, Father, into your hands is with him. But I think he wants to help us to see. He knows what we're feeling. Like, he is feeling everything with us. And for me, like, this is one of the most helpful things when I'm going through my own suffering, is to know that he is with me. And there is nothing that I will go through and he is not there. Can you read more this thing from Chrysostom?
Christ as the bridegroom loves his wife so much, that is, the church, or the individual soul, that when she abandons him, he does not regret having betrayed her. When she sins against him, he does not renounce her, but rather he pursues his fallen bride even into the very depths of hell.
So I love this verse. I often really connect with Christ as the bridegroom, but he says, Christ loves us so much, like, he never thought, like, oh, I'm just going to get rid of these people, like, you know, like, I had enough of them, let's just create new people. Like, he doesn't even regret making us. Like, he's like, what can I do to pursue these people whom I love? And he says, like the Trinity, you can imagine, are sitting there, like, even to the depths of hell, I will go to pursue them, because I don't want to leave them. I want to be with them wherever they are. I want to reach them wherever they are with my love. Even at this point on the cross, like, they're shouting, crucify him. They're shouting all these like things to mock him. And he's still saying, I want to go wherever you are. I want to reach you wherever you are. And through the cross, he does go even into Hades to go and reach us. Like, he doesn't leave any place unreached. Like, one of my favorite psalms is Psalm 139. And it says, where shall I go from your spirit? Even if I make my bed in the depths of hell, you are there. Like, wherever we are in our life, whatever our suffering, whatever our pain, whatever bleakness, or whatever you're facing in your life, like, it's never too far away from God to reach you. Whatever your sin is that you feel stuck in and you've been doing over and over again, it's not somewhere too far that he can't reach. Like, he has shown on the cross, he will go to death. He will go to the depths of hell for you. There is nowhere you can go that he won't come to you. This word to the end means, like, to the uttermost, to the most complete way. Like, he said, I've loved you with everything I have. There's, like, nothing left. Like, there's no other way that I could love you possibly. Like, I have given you everything of myself. This is what he shows us on the cross. He shows it on the cross so that every time, like, we're unsure if he loves us, we can look at the cross and know it. Every time we're not sure, like, the devil tells you, well, you know, this sin, this problem in your life is too much, this thing is too big for him. You see the cross and you say, no, like, his love will go anywhere for me. And his love is bigger. So the next bit I want to focus on is there's so much that is happening on the cross that you don't see when you first look at the cross. Like, when you look at Christ on the cross, you see a man suffering in pain, bleeding, like it looks bleak. Like, you're like, you know, like, I can't imagine a worse situation than this person is dying here. But there's so much happening that we can't see. When you look just like with normal eyes, and you just look with your human eyes, you don't know what else is happening. Michael, did you read it? Okay, sorry.
I am the one,
Yeah.
and the one, says the Christ. I am the one that destroyed death and triumphed the enemy, and trod down Hades, and bound the strong one, and carried man to the heights of heaven. I am the one, says the Christ.
So this is an old Christian writer, and there's, like, I mean, he's kind of summarized most of what's happening in the unseen realm that we can't see. But he says on the cross, all these things are happening. Like, we see a man dying, but actually what's happening are all these things. Like death is being destroyed, the enemy is being triumphed over. The strong one, which is the devil, is being bound. Man is being taken to heaven. Christ is doing all these things. And we're just going to go through them one by one very quickly. So actually, Claire had this verse earlier as well, and it's probably going to come up tomorrow, I imagine, as well. But death is overcome. This is not just in the resurrection. Like in the resurrection, I think also this applies. But through him going through death, death is overcome. Why? Because he is God who is life. Like life can't go through death and death win. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like he goes through death and overcomes death. And as Claire was saying earlier, like death often is our big enemy that everyone is fearing and is the result of sin. But death he overcomes, and it's been swallowed up in victory. In Colossians, St. Paul says, having disarmed the powers and authorities are like the devils and the demons, that's what he means by that. He made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Like the cross was him. We see a man dying, but Satan is being defeated on the cross. In Colossians, he says, you were dead in your trespasses, but he's made you alive, having forgiven all your trespasses, having wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us. Through the cross, we know this, but do we really know this? Our sins were forgiven. Yes, it looks like he's just a man dying, but actually through the cross, he's forgiving our sins, all of our big ones and the ones that we repeat 100 times. Every single one of those, he's forgiving on the cross. And make sure we realize it. He even chooses to forgive them as he's dying. He says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And it's not just but he makes a way for us to have a new life, a different life, a powerful life. I think actually Claire mentioned this verse as well. He says, for our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that we might become the righteousness of God. It's not just that he took our sin, but he made it so we could be righteous people. We could become the righteousness of God. Not just we be righteous people, we are the righteousness of God. That's more than just being righteous. That's more than just being good people. He says we can become the righteousness of God. Everything that Christ was, he's saying we can become through the cross. In another verse he says, in Ephesians, he says, in Christ Jesus, you who used to be far away have been brought near by the blood of Christ. We had no way of really living with God forever. There was no way. We separate ourselves by all of our deeds, by our corruption, by our sin. But by the blood of Christ, he brings us to be near. He wants us to be so close to him, to be intimate. He said, I don't want there to be any barriers. Even if I have to go through this cross, this pain, this suffering, I will do it so I can be near with you. And then, as it said a little bit before, he says, I'm going to open heaven for you. I'm not just going to get rid of death and just leave you living on earth forever. That doesn't make any sense. I want to take you to heaven with me, to live with me forever. We're nearly finished. I don't know if any of you guys know this song from Kenny. Maybe Miriam will give us a little rendition later of who has the final say. But sometimes we feel like the world or our suffering or our pain or whatever is going on around us or whatever is going inside of us or the devil is the one that is in control of things or has the final say of what's happening. And you can look at the people shouting, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him to Pilate and think that they are the one in control of the situation. But they don't have the final say in any of this. God has the final say. And he says on the cross, it is finished. What does it is finished mean? It means I've actually accomplished everything I came to accomplish. This didn't all happen by chance. This didn't just happen because, the people got their way. This happened because I needed to go through the cross for you. I wanted to go through the cross for you. And the will of the Father has been accomplished. God has the final say. He is the one in control of everything. He says in the gospel, I lay down my life, no one takes it from me, but I lay it down for myself. Sometimes we think that, when you see him dying on the cross, it seems like he's not in control of the situation. But he is in control Like, he is completely in control. He is in control of his life. Like Claire mentioned earlier, he can get legions of angels if he wants. But he chose the cross for us. And sometimes in our life, like we're going to see later, like it looks like God is not there or not in control of our situation because of what we see. But something else is going on. And he always has the final say. And we see it like just in the way that he dies. Like he chooses when he's going to send his spirit up to heaven. He says, Father, I commit into your hands I commit my spirit, I commit my spirit. Like he chooses when he dies. Like you think they've chosen because he's on the cross, but he chooses. And it says after he gives up his spirit, then he bows his head. It's not just that he like bowed his head and died. Like he, as if he's choosing, like, that's it, I'm going to put my head down now and die. Like he's that much in control of here. Like how is it possible? He is. We so much actually value the church, the cross in our church, that we sing this hymn, Your Pekthronos. I don't know if you guys know it. It's one of the hymns that we sing. We sing it twice in Holy Week. We sing it on Good Friday, I think in the 12th hour, and
12th hour on Tuesday.
12th hour on Tuesday. We sing it on Good Friday, so like on Good hour, also on Good Friday.
11th hour.
11th hour. There we go. And it's quite a long hymn. Sometimes it can take like 20 minutes. It's like the Psalm of the Hour sung. That can be quite long. And it's strange because we're singing this hymn saying, "Your throne, O God, is forever and ever." That's what it means. Like we sing it in Coptic usually, but that's what the words are. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. And we're singing this about Christ on the cross. Like most people look at the cross and they're like, I mean, if I was going to choose a throne for myself, I'm not going to choose the cross. I'm going to choose like a nice comfy chair and like velvet and plush and whatever else. But this, we say, is his throne. In actually a lot of Orthodox churches, they even change the inscription on the top where it says INRI, which means the King of the Jews. They change it to the King of Glory, like because they see that this is his throne of glory. I really like this quote. Maria, can you read it for us?
Glory is not determined by the way you find the sun, or by sitting next to the but rather by the accomplishment.
So this is from a really nice book called The Crucified Jesus. It's a really good book to read, like during Lent or Holy Week. It's like contemplations all on Christ, like before and during his crucifixion and so on. But he says that glory is determined by the accomplishment of the will of God, and this is why this is his throne of glory, because he truly accomplished the Father's will on this throne. And it doesn't look like glory how we imagine. Like we imagine glory to be angels like praising us, people praising us, comfort and every luxury. Like that's what we often think glory is. But glory, real glory, is accomplishing the will of God. And sometimes it looks like the cross. So the last thing, just to quickly mention, but this is going to obviously come tomorrow, like hidden on Great and Holy Friday, and actually on Easter morning, it's really made manifest like what the victory is when Christ is risen. But that will be talked about tomorrow. But it will be sometimes like we go through our cross in our life, and the victory is happening. There is so much happening in the unseen realm, but it's still hidden from our eyes. But there will be the Easter morning where the victory is made manifest. Yeah, I'm sure I have a come to that tomorrow. Okay, so what does this all mean for us? Sandra, could you read for us?
Christ did not suffer instead of us, but he suffered on our behalf. He did not exempt us from suffering, but showed us how to suffer. Christ offers us not a way around suffering, but a way through it. Not substitution, but saving companionship.
Thank you. So this is again from the Orthodox way. So I think like often in other Christian theologies, like not Orthodox theology, there's a slight different theology about kind of the cross and salvation. And sometimes we kind of take it on without realizing. And we often talk about Christ doing things like instead of us. Like he did all these things instead of us so that we don't have to do anything. And like, it's quite a fine line to understand. It's difficult to understand exactly like what the differences are. But in our Orthodox understanding, Christ did do all these things for us. But it doesn't mean that we don't have to do anything. Like we, as we said right at the beginning, we are living life joining Christ on the journey. And everything Christ lived through, like actually, we're supposed to be living with him on the journey. So as Christ suffered, also, like we are to expect suffering in our life. And like most people don't want to hear that part of the gospel. Like, but actually, if you read the Gospels or you read the epistles of St. Paul, he says over and over again that we are going to suffer with Christ. And one of the writers I read, Thomas Tucker, who said, this is what we call the bad news of the good news. Like people like the good news that Jesus saves us. They love the bit like Jesus forgave us all of our sins, that we go to heaven. The bad news of the good news is that actually like he did all this so that we can also go through it with him. But he's with us on the way. He's given us the victory on the way. Like he has done, like he's the one who defeated Satan, defeated death, done all those things. Like he has done the real like action. Over and over again, he tells us in the Gospels, if you want to come after me, if you want to be my disciple, if you want to follow me, you have to take up your cross. You have to take up your cross. And I think like these are kind of verses we wish to like ignore and pretend they're not there, especially after we just heard what the cross was. Like what is this like cross that God is talking about? Like, I don't want this cross. But he says, if you really want to come after me, if you want to walk with me to everything that I'm going through, you need to take up your cross too. So what does that mean? Like, what is our cross? Our cross can be so many, it can be so many different things, but it usually is some kind of sorrow, some kind of hardship or adversity or suffering. And it can be an external thing that's going on around us, like something that we're suffering in our life. It could be financial, it could be our health, it could be our work, it could be something outside. It could be our interior cross, like our spiritual struggle, our sin, our whatever is going on inside our hearts. I think for some people, like even, like they say even for monks, sometimes like their asceticism is our cross as well. So there can be different kinds of crosses. But to take up our cross means that you go through all of these things, whatever they are, however painful they are, however difficult they are, that you take them with joy, with love, with strength. And that's the hard thing, I think. Like, we can't avoid the crosses. Like, the cross is always going to be there, whether we like it or not. But it's about actually taking up our cross, how we bear this cross, how we hold this cross. One of the Orthodox writers said, like, talks about how, like, man thinks, like, I'm going to be free if I get rid of my sufferings. Like, that will be my freedom. And, like, most of the time when we're praying, that's what we're praying for. I want to be free of this cross that I have. I want to be free of this suffering that I have. And then, you know, life will be good and everything will be right. He said, no. He said, he will never be free when he thinks like that. He'll be free when he stops wanting to be free of his sufferings. That's when he will be free. He says, our life depends on being in a right relationship with God. And that means being able to accept the death that Christ asked for us. Then you will be with God. And then you will be an instrument of God's will, when you are willing to accept whatever suffering comes your way. I know this is hard to hear on a Saturday night, quite late at night when you're all half asleep. But that is what the gospel teaches us. We, as I was just saying, like often we think our victory over our suffering or over like our pain or our problem is that we get rid of that thing. That to me, like, is usually what I think of as victory. Like, I have this problem in my life, I have this hardship, I have whatever is happening. If I'm rid of it, that means I'm victorious. But actually, the way that Jesus talks about it, the way that our church fathers teach us, is actually, it's being able to endure what we're going through. That is actually our victory. In the gospel, in 3 occasions, Christ says to us, he who endures to the end shall be saved. Like, if you're able to keep going with me, keep going to the end of my journey, that's when you'll be saved, because then you will reach the resurrection with me. If you're going to give up before you get there, you're not going to reach to the end to be saved. It's he who endures to the end who will be saved. And like, we can get really caught up in all like the small ups and downs of life, but it's keeping going. It's our patience in our tribulation that is our victory. Mother Martyria says, it's your constant patience and faith which will decide the struggle against sin, not the occasional victories or defeats. Like, it's not about just these ups and downs. Like, we're going to have our ups and downs, but it's about our persistence, our walking with Christ. So by now you all had a lot of my voice and are probably very bored of listening to me. So we're going to take a 2-minute interlude and hear a little excerpt from this book. This is a really beautiful book, I think Michael Fick shared it in YLM, for anyone who hasn't read it. It's a lovely book that is basically like a dialogue between a monk and Jesus. And it kind of tells us his contemplations. He kind of walks through all of Jesus' life and kind of questions him sometimes, like, why did you do this, Jesus? And what happened here? What was going on here? And tries to understand like his spiritual journey and understanding Jesus' journey. It's a really beautiful book. Like each chapter is like 3 pages long. So if you're a person who struggles to read, like I highly recommend it. Anyway, Matthew and Will, please come to your front. It's your moment. I'll put the words through just so you can help you follow, but they're gonna this read is gonna take about 3 minutes.
Guys, you need to raise your voice. Come front, come front, come to the front.
Can you come closer? Can you come closer? We can't really see.
Will. But the one which I shall place on your shoulders.
Master, I accept the crosses which you bear, which you may bear, and give me strength to bear them.
My child, do not say crosses as though there were several. There is only one, my cross, and your cross is mine suited to you, to your strength. Some people speak of small crosses. There are no small crosses. Whatever form it may take, it's my cross which you must bear.
Master, I shall bear it if you give me strength.
My child, it is not enough to take up your cross and walk behind me. It is true that it is by bearing the cross that one really does follow me, but you must follow me right to the end. You know where I am going. I am going to Golgotha. The cross which I am carrying and which you are carrying is the instrument of a life immolated unto death. After carrying the cross, you will have to stretch out on it, be nailed to it, and die on it. Are you willing to stay with me right to the end? Are you willing to carry my cross up to Calvary? And once you get there, don't you want to share in my crucifixion?
Master, I have not the strength to be crucified with you.
My child, he that shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. I know that you are not ready. The sacrifice attracts you, but you are not yet capable of it. I would like to prepare you for it day by day. Every morning be ready to embrace the cross which the new day sets before you. Accept it in the spirit of the total immolation of Golgotha as one more step towards the end of the Via Dolorosa.
I won't talk too much about it. It was kind of just like a little interlude for us to have a break from me, but just to hear somebody else.
Sorry, the phone's gonna die.
Someone else's perspective of what the cross is. And what really struck me when I was reading this is like, I mean, it sounds tough, like what he's saying. He's saying it's not just enough that you're bearing your cross. He says you need to go all the way to Golgotha, even to be nailed on the cross. But also you see like the sweetness of Jesus when he's talking to him. Like Jesus is talking to him, I understand that you don't have the strength yet. Don't worry. I know that you want to be with me, but you don't feel like you can do it yet, and you can't do it yet. That's like he understands all of our strength, and he understands what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. Just before anyone freaks out, because I know what I'm saying is hard. He knows our strength, but he is with us in everything. And he says each day is a new day. Each day is a new day to be with me. Which takes us to the next step. So we hear a lot in the New Testament tells us about taking up our cross, but it also tells us about being crucified with Christ. To the point that I no longer live, is what St. Paul says, but Christ lives in me. This is like what we are hoping to achieve in our life, in our Christian life. And I think in baptism we have a death with Christ, and we're raised with a new man, but it doesn't end there. Like sometimes we think, I was baptized, that's enough, like I had my death with Christ and I'm raised and that's it. Like as we just read, it's about every day choosing to die again. And St. Paul says that. He says, I die daily. It's about every day choosing that my old man is going to die and my new man is going to live. My new man is the one that I'm going to walk with. In Romans, he says, our old man was crucified with him, that the body of sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves of sin. This is why we need to die every day, because every time we start to fall into a pattern of sin, we can become slaves of sin. So we need to keep putting to death our old man. Joe, could you read this real quickly?
For a wheat seed to come fully into its own, it must come wholly undone. The shell must break open, its insides must come out, and everything must change. So you don't understand what life is like, you might mistake it for life.
So a lot of the Christian life is like this, like everything looks a bit upside down, like death is life, life is death, like everything's a bit upside down. So this is like based on the verse where it says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. Like this farmer saying, like when the grain of wheat has to die, like it needs to become completely undone, like everything is changed from the inside, like its insides come out and everything has to be different. Like it can't just stay as it is. And our daily death with Christ can be a difficult thing, quite a painful thing. There's a lot inside us that needs to change. Like if you look in your heart and you know your heart, like you know that there's a lot inside you that for our journey with Christ, that what's inside us needs to change, and then we take on our new man. Like your groups are all called the fruits of the Spirit. Like this is what we take on is the life of Christ and who he is. Another part of our daily death is as Christ chose to put his will in the hands of the Father and follow the will of the Father, it's us doing the same thing. So again, from the Liturgy of St. Gregory, which I really like, this is the priest part, but I think it's beautiful. It says, I offer to you, O my master, the symbols of my freedom. Like, what's the symbols of my freedom? It's my will. Like, my will is the symbol of my freedom. It is my freedom. Like, that's the thing I can choose. He's saying, I'm offering to you my will to choose whatever is your will. And then the second part is also really important. It says, I write my deeds in keeping with your words. Like, when I'm choosing what to do, how to act, I'm choosing to do what you're telling me. Like, I'm choosing to do what you're commanding me to do, what you're saying is good and right to do. That is what I'm choosing to do. That is part of our death, is choosing not to just follow like any whim of my old man, any whim of like my heart, any whim of my feeling. They're saying like, when I'm making my choices, when I'm choosing how to act, how to speak, what to do, I'm going to choose according to what you're commanding me to do. And then as Christ showed us that his victory was a victory of suffering love, like if we are also to be victorious, we're going to have a love that suffers as well. And as we have to join him in his journey, everything he's doing, like that includes the way his body was broken. Maria, could you read for us? Top bit.
If we want to be what Christ is,
I can't turn it off.
Sorry.
if we want to be what Christ is, Christ is the bread of life whose body is broken, blood spilled, and food tasted. That's what we must become ourselves.
So this is from Mother Teresa, and I feel like it has so much weight because Mother Teresa is the one saying it, because that is how she lived her life. But she's saying, if we're going to be like Christ, Christ broke his body, spilled his blood for us. That means we have to live the same way. Why do we think that if we're going to follow Christ, I can just live in my own bubble, just looking after myself, making myself comfortable and happy, and that means I'm following Christ? Like, when that looks nothing like how he lived. Like, he lived his life with his body broken for everyone, his blood spilled for everyone. If we're going to follow him, that's part of our death. He's saying, I'm willing to pour out myself with those around me who need me. And we're asking the Holy Spirit to come, the invocation of the Spirit, asking him to come upon the gifts, the bread and wine, to change them. We also ask him to come and change us, because we also are the bread and wine to be broken for everybody. So it's for us too. And then just like another thing, just for like some more practical understanding of what it looks like to have this daily death. If you read the Sermon on the Mount, and like you really read the Sermon on the Mount, and you really think about living the Sermon on the Mount, a lot of it will feel like a death to yourself. Because actually it's telling you, turn the other cheek when somebody is hitting you. It's telling you like to accept being persecuted. It's telling you to give and give more to the person who needs from you. Like, it's a death to the things that are yourself, like your anger and those kind of things. And also like a real giving in a broken way to like a breaking way to other people. So if you don't know how to live, like read the Sermon on the Mount and think about how can I actually live this? Like, it's not just nice words that we really love, like it's one of the most famous passages in the Bible, but how much of it do we live? Okay, so all I've said can be thought as really difficult. I've just said we have to take up our cross. We have to keep dying daily, be crucified with Christ. So how do we do this? Like, it can seem overwhelming. What we need to do is to remember all the things we've just learned that he's taught us on the cross. Because that's how we have our victory. Like, he's shown us on the cross how we can have this victory, like what victory he's already got for us. So the first thing is to remember that he is with us. He is with us in everything that we're going through, in every pain and every suffering. He is with us. And like, it's so real, like he really is there with you. Like, it's not just a word, it's not just like something airy-fairy, like he is with you in every pain you feel. Like, and I know I've really known this, like I've had times where like I felt so broken, and like I didn't know how to get out of my like despair of my heart. Like, my brokenness wasn't like nothing necessarily going on outside me, but inside me. And as much as you can tell somebody else and get love from someone else, like you don't know, they don't really know how you feel. But Christ is with you, and he knows everything of your heart, and he never leaves you in whichever situation you're in. And as we said right at the beginning, not death, not life, not angels, not demons, not anything. Nothing in this life, or nothing can separate us from the love of God. So whatever your problem, whatever your suffering, whatever your cross, whatever your sin, nothing can separate you from the love of God. And we need to remember that. This Saint Nicholas, I don't know who he is, but he's a saint, apparently from the Orthodox Church. He says, don't ever succumb to the insane thought that God has abandoned you. Like, he says, to think that God has abandoned you is insane. God knows what you can endure, and he makes sure that he gives you according to that, like the measure of what you're able to endure. But he never abandons you. As we saw earlier, he is enough. Like, he is always in control. When it doesn't look like he's in control, he's still in control. It looks like they're telling him to be crucified, and they're the ones in control, but he was still in control on the cross. He was in control of his life, he was in control of what's going on, because he was doing it for us. In our life, it's the same. Like, it can look like he is not there and he is not in control, but he is. He is. If we're choosing him, he is in control. And we just need to learn how to rely on him and his power. Like, actually, it's okay when we're weak, and it's good even when we're feeling weak and we can't do things, because then we learn to rely on him and his power and his grace. His grace is always sufficient for us. And he wants us to remember that everything is in his hands. Like, he is the one, as we said, has the final say. And if he is all these things, like if his love is with us forever, if he is with us forever, if he holds everything, then we need to cling to him like as tightly as we can in everything we're going through. I'm not going to read all this, but maybe take a picture and read it later if you haven't seen me use it before. It's a quote that I absolutely love from St. John Chrysostom, but he basically says that Christ is everything for us, and he does everything for us. He says, I'm your father, I'm your friend, I have gone to the cross for you, I have gone to this for you, I have done everything possible for you. Everything that could be done, everything you need me to be, I am it. I am all these things, like anything you need in this life, like whatever you need in your bleak situation, in your hopelessness, like I am there, but all you need is to cling closely to me. Cling closely, and I love this word cling. I think it really helps us to understand, like, clinging is not just be close to me or be near to me. Cling means like to really hang on to with everything you have. Like, you know, when you cling on to something because you're about to die, like that's what you think, you cling on to it, like, because otherwise we will die if we don't cling to him. Like, we need to hold on to him. And then we need to remember that there's so much going on that we can't see, and we need to ask God to give us eyes to see what else like we need to see. So this is from St. Paul's epistle to the Corinthians, I believe. He says, we look not to things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. Like, St. Paul had the eyes that could see what is not seen, and we need to ask for this. This comes from a passage where he says, our outward man is perishing. Like, it looks like my body is dying. Like, I'm dying from the outside. Everyone looks at me and is like, you look like a dead man walking. But he said, no, my inside is being renewed every day. Something else is going on. God is still working in me. Elder Sophrony said, sufferings bear so much fruit that if we were a bit wiser, we would never want to come down from the cross. We would realize that this cross has got so much for me, it's doing so much good for me, that I'd say, yes, God, I really want to be on the cross every day. Not like, I have to endure it, so, you know, I'm just going to endure it because I have to. He says, no, like if you realize what's happening that you can't see, you say, yes, God, I want to be within your suffering. And that's what St. Paul did say. St. Paul said, like, I'm joyous to be part of his suffering. Like, we count ourselves glad that we could suffer with Christ. Because they knew something else was going on that we couldn't see. They knew God was still doing something that they couldn't see. A couple of the things that we know that he does, like when you hear of Job, and Job went through like some of the most horrific sufferings you can imagine. When he went through these sufferings, he said, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Like after his sufferings, he could really know God more intimately. And this is a man who was very righteous. Like he already was very righteous. He already was living with God. But he said, there was something more that happened when I went through the suffering. I could really see you, God. And Henry Newman says something similar. He says, we're not going to want to get rid of our suffering when we realize how God is using it, how he uses it to change us, how he uses it to draw us close to him. And then, these are just a small selection, but if you look through, there are so many verses which talk about how when we suffer with Christ, we're also glorified with Christ. And I'm not going to read them because there's so many. But he says over and over again, if you suffer with Christ, you are glorified with him. If you suffer with Christ, you are glorified with him. And we know about the glory of Christ. We see that if you suffer with him, you will also be glorified with him. I like this one from the very bottom from Timothy. He says, if we endure, as we said earlier, this is what we need to do, like to keep going, to keep persevering with Christ, we shall also reign with him. And even after having said all this, I know that it's still not necessarily that clear. Like it's clear in some ways, but sometimes you still look at it and you're like, but really, I really don't understand. Like, why do I have to suffer? Like, why? Why do I have to suffer? What has suffering got to do with anything? And I'm just going to tell you, like, I can't tell you all the answers. Like, a lot of our Christianity, we don't understand it all. And we will one day. He says, now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Like, there will be a day where things will be much clearer. But for now, we understand that this is the mystery of his will. Like, he's told us this is how it is. I can't explain all of it, why it happens, like why that is the way it is. But this is the mystery of his will. If you reach all of that, which I think when you're really in the pain and you're really in the suffering, you can reach all of that and still be like, but I still don't know how to do it. I still don't know how to keep going. Then this, I think, is something that we could do. Where did I get to? Jamal, do you mind reading for us?
When I look at you, Lord Jesus, I no longer feel the need of questioning you. I receive answers to specific questions. Your person, your image are a sufficient and complete answer. If I fix my eyes on you, in you everything is revealed to me. Obscurely indeed, but powerfully, and even this obscurity is often a dazzling brightness. When it seems to me that I have obtained a clear vision of you, everything becomes clear to me.
So this is also from Jesus' Dialogue with the Saviour, the book I mentioned earlier. I think like sometimes you can know all of this about the cross, know all of this about his victory, but in your own like suffering, it can still be really difficult. Like it can still be really difficult to know what's going on and know what your path is and know how to carry on. And I think this is the answer, like when we don't know what to do. And I think even when you feel like you know what to do, this is still the answer. Like this is always the answer. He says, like, what I need to do is just sit and look at you, Jesus. And particularly sit and look at you on the cross. And he says, when I look at you, everything starts to make sense. Even like at the beginning, it doesn't seem to make sense much, but then 10,000 things like, please Jesus, remove this from me, and please help me with this, and please. Like you can also say your prayers, of course, I'm not saying don't say those things. But sometimes we need to learn how to sit quietly and just look at Jesus, and particularly look at Jesus on his cross. Because when we learn to see Jesus, like everything becomes clear. Because I think Satan said in the morning, he is the way, the truth, and the life. Like when you look at him, he will show you what is the truth. He will show you what is the way. He will show you how he is our life. So if we have 5 more minutes, can we take 5 more minutes? If we have 5 more minutes to take, I was thinking maybe we could try this practically. And I was going to, if we can, just play Pekthronos. Like, not the whole thing, we can just listen to the first 5 minutes. While everyone kind of just takes 5 minutes just to try and sit with Jesus. I know, like, it's difficult, there's lots of people around. But try and sit in like your heart and just sit with Jesus. And it's difficult if you're not used to doing it. Sitting quietly is quite hard. I think if you're really like struggling with your mind wandering, this is a really nice psalm that you can maybe read. So it's Psalm 13. You can get it on your phone. I'm not going to leave it there because we'll have the picture of Jesus up. But Psalm 13 is a really beautiful verse, a beautiful psalm which kind of goes through this journey with us of how sometimes like we're really stuck in this place where we're like, where are you, God? And my life is really like a struggle, and I feel like all I am doing is sorry, and I feel like my enemy is like winning. To the point where he says, actually, like when he starts to pray, he says, like, take away, like, help me to see you in the darkness. He says, enlighten my eyes, like, so help me see you in the darkness. And at the end, he says, I trust in your mercy. I'm going to rejoice in your salvation. And he realizes that God is with him even in all that bleakness of everything. So that's something you can read if you're struggling with the quiet, but the best thing is if you can just sit quietly with Jesus. And we'll have this up. And do you know if it's still connected? We'll see if it's still connected or not. Let's see what happens. Sorry, it might take a second to work out. Let me just quickly check. Oh, you need to come out. Slightly better. Well, that's all I had, but I guess maybe, so this is from, as I said, the songs that we're going to sing in Holy Week. So hopefully, like, pretty coming up pretty soon, but when the songs happen, don't just think like, I don't know, it depends on what kind of person you're like, don't just think like this is like something that the deacons are singing that I have like no idea what's going on. Like, take it as your chance to like sit and gaze at Jesus. And because when we look at him, everything disappears. That's all. Does anyone have anything that they want to add?
Nina. Thank you for coming. شكرا يا مينا.